we try to do, we can do, is when it comes to some of these wellness
spender versus saver, etc. And the ability to be together on that can be so powerful when a couple is headed the same direction, and conversely, not so good when they aren't.
Also, my grandparents were products of the Depression.
of their values rubbed off. So those are the key people in my life. How about you? Somebody volunteer to share? Key person or people?
Well, my dad, he was church treasurer for a while, but basically he kept all the books and he could tell you to the penny how much each meal cost us per year. And he was like, had everything for you.
Okay, so your dad and his focus on detail. Okay, good. Somebody else. Who was a key person in your financial realm as far as shaping who you are today? Looks like you've got an uncle. Okay, so a business-minded uncle, and you got to observe him, etc., and some of it rubbed off. Great.
My parents had a bad experience with debt when I was very young. When I was a teenager, they pounded at me, don't you ever get into it.
Okay, so
That stuff with me.
so what they learned from their experience, they passed on to you, hoping not to have the same experience. Good. Anybody else? Just quickly, go ahead.
Well, I think I learned a lot. I have a business minor from college.
Okay, so college classes became a huge learning ground for you as you focused on that. Good. Boy, we've been sometimes blessed with good mentors that way. I had one business teacher that I took from that. He shaped, my world would be different if it weren't for him. So good. I'll take one or two more. Anybody else? Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so necessity has been your teacher, aided by God helping you do that. Great. Well, thank you for sharing. I use this phrase, chart my course, where you can either drift or you can chart your course. And I think too many people drift financially. There's any number of ways we can drift. We can drift into spending habits. We can drift into debt. We can drift, as it were. What happens when we get a nice raise? Well, usually we bring the spending right up to that new level, etc. So we can drift in many ways, and we can have much more impact as we chart our course, as we choose where we want to go and then decide how to get there. Our top 3 worries, as recorded in Money Magazine about 6 years ago. Number 1, having enough for retirement. Number 2, how would I manage if an emergency hit? So the top 3 financial worries. So people out in our neighborhoods that we're trying to reach, they're worried about retirement, the future. They're worried about the present. What happens if that noise in the transmission turns into something bigger and a big clunk? And 3, I'm living from paycheck to paycheck. Okay, so what Pastor was reflecting on, a recent experience or several experiences, were implementations of those worries. Those worries were coming to fruition for people, and something bad had happened for them. Money is the number 1 source of marital arguments. 41% said arguments occur at least once per month. So you're having 12 plus arguments throughout the year. Does not draw couples together. But I believe that finances that are done together the right way can actually draw people together because it pulls you toward common goals. John 10:10 says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." God is not wanting us to have that kind of stress, that kind of approach to money in marriage, etc. He wants to give us the very best. Also he says, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." He says, look, you You look after my business, and I'll look after yours. Talk about a promise. He says, you worry about my kingdom business here on this earth, I'll take care of the rest. I want to be a participant in that, and I believe that managing, I want to say my finances, but really I want it to be his finances going through my hands, can allow me to make a difference there. So many people just come in, and the only question you ask is, what's the minimum payment? Doesn't matter how many years it takes to get that payment down. Do I stretch it over 3, 5, 7, or longer, depending on what it is I'm buying? It's just, what's the monthly payment? Can I squeeze that into what I'm already doing? We want to hit the target. We want to say, whatever it is that God is laying on our heart, we want that to be what we hit. I love what this says. We actually shared it together some weeks before when I had the opportunity to worship with you. There's great gain in godliness with contentment, for we brought nothing in, we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. Godliness with contentment, great gain. Talk about wealth. God's word says this is where wealth comes from. I assume this is for me. That will be helpful. Another great passage from God's word. I have no need of a bull from your stall or of goats from your pens, for every animal of the forest is mine and the cattle on 1,000 hills. If I were hungry, I love this one. If I forgot my lunch, I wouldn't come knocking on your door, he says. I have everything. I own everything. Number one, it's all God's anyway. Anything in my banking account is really his. Anything in my wallet, there isn't much in there, is his. Anything I call mine at my house is his. I love this passage. If you start thinking to yourselves, I did all this, and all by myself. I'm rich, it's all mine. Well, think again. Remember that God, your God, gave you the strength to produce all this wealth so as to confirm the covenant that he promised to your ancestors as it is today. Of course, they were standing on the eve of the promised land, and Moses is speaking for God here and says, don't forget, when I bless you, the tendency is to congratulate myself. God pours out a blessing, and I say, wow, didn't I do a great job? And yet God says it's all from him. According to God's word, he owns everything, and yet he wants to partner with you and me and do something extraordinary in our lives and in the lives of those around us. That's why we're doing this. Something that will be as different and unique as each family in this room. I want to just ask you, what practical difference would it make in the lives of those around you if they lived with the conviction that everything they possessed came from God, and he wanted to partner with them in every area of their lives, including the financial? If you could briefly say what that might look like, if the people around you, the people in your family, the people in your extended family or whatever, what would a church look like if everybody felt that they lived with the conviction that everything they had came from God and that he wanted to partner with them? What would that do to a church? Yeah, it's not my money. So the ownership perspective would fade away. What else? It is hard to imagine that story in the Old Testament where Moses finally says, stop. Haven't seen a church yet where the pastor got up front and said, stop. Can't do anything more with the offering. We have no more uses for reaching our community or anything like that. I think it would be transformational. I know it would be transformational. So do you. We're going to run through 5 significant steps, and they are on your sheet. So let's go ahead and jump in. Number 1, and this is where I would start with people who are saying, okay, I want to recognize that God is in charge. Number 1 is to prayerfully turn my or our finances over to God. You know, if it's a couple, kneel down together and pray and say, God, we want to manage your resources, and we want to do it together. We want it to be something that pulls us together, not something that drives a wedge between us. So number 1, super simple, super powerful. Proverbs 16:1 says, we can make our own plans, but the Lord gives the right answer. Simple, punchy, and powerful. We can make our own plans, but the Lord gives the right answer, which means He'll do it as well in our financial arena. Or, Proverbs 16:3, 2 verses later, commit your actions to the Lord and your plans will succeed. Isn't that a great promise for our financial plans when they become the Lord's plans that He's given to us? Number 2 is to determine where you are financially. So we start with a recognition that everything we have is from God. Number 2, and this is working with people on charting that course, is to go ahead and determine where you are financially. How are we going to do that? What does that even mean? If you're in a ship and your destination is here, which direction do you need to go? That direction from wherever you are, right? But you don't know, is that east or west or north by northwest? Or unless you know where you are, your destination isn't going to be real helpful. So what are we going to do? How are we going to determine where we are financially? Well, one thing would be to figure out what are the things we have, right? Otherwise known as our assets. At the same time, we go ahead.
Ken and I made out a financial statement before we were married,
Mm-hmm.
just to see where we were.
Excellent. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, is figuring out, what do I have? What are the assets that I can use to move forward financially? What are the commitments I have? You know, coming out of college, it may well be college debt. Somehow you've got to have transportation. You may have had to borrow to do that, etc. And so you're just going to take stock of where you are. Actually, I don't think it's a bad exercise annually, end of the year. Sit down and just kind of jot out where you are and see if you're making progress toward your goals. So you're going to sit down and do a financial statement. You're just going to say, here's what I own, the big things. Here's what I owe. And of course, what you owe are going to be those things that are not going to get paid off this month, right? We're not talking about your utility bill or your phone bill or any of that. It's the things that will last beyond a month's pay. So you're determining where you are financially. If a person has a significant amount of debt, that would probably be good to sit down and actually write out each type of debt, what the minimum payment is, what the interest rate is. That can be revealing to sit down, and as we talked last night, it can maybe help us in determining how we go about taking care of that. You know, do we go after the one that can give us a triumph earliest, so the smallest debt? Do we tackle that one that has that obscene interest rate that we didn't even really know till we jotted it down? That'll help you line something out there. That make sense? I really think that first step is super important. It's not something you just do and move on. When we turn our finances over to God, it's an attitude change. Then the rest can come because we can ask Him to help us as we work on some of those other things. Number 3 is to determine where you want to go. And there's 2 things you're going to look at in this. You're going to look at your values, and you're going to look at your goals. So you've figured out where you are. Now, to use the nautical theme that we've had, the ships, you've figured out where you are. Now you can figure out where you want to go and how you want to get there. So let's talk about these 2. Values tend to be general and will rarely change. Goals will tend to be specific, will be short, medium, or long-term in range, and once met, they may be finished. You'll have a goal and you work toward it, and then it's done. Whereas your values determine how you want to shape your budget. So values, they tend to be general and will rarely change. So here's an example of what that might be. A young family might say, one of our values is that we want to maximize yearly vacations to build memories while our children are young. So that would be not only a financial goal, that would be a time goal. They're saying we're going to carve out time every year to spend quality time with our kids so they have some of those memories rather than waiting, until we realize, oh no, they're going to college. What can we do to make some memories? So that could be a value that we say, this is a family value. We stand for this, and we're going to shape our time and our money accordingly. And again, that may or may not be an expensive endeavor. Vacations don't have to be expensive. Tents and camping can be pretty inexpensive, but that's a family value. Give me some examples of what might be some other values. So not goals, but these are values that just say this is the fabric, this is the makeup of our family, and they are unique to us, and it will shape what we do financially. Can you give me some examples? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Okay, so you say, hey, one of our values is doing things together as a family, not just the vacations, but we want to be doing things together, and we're going to find ways to do that. That could impact your budget, couldn't it? You might take up, some people take up snow skiing. That was in my wife's family. That is the family sport. And so they made life adjust so that they could do that family togetherness. In their case, it was skiing, but it was that value of doing something together. So yes. Somebody else. Examples.
Teaching children to be entrepreneurs and to make money at a young age is a value of some parents.
Yes, perfect. So it could be that you say, hey, we want our kids to have opportunities, and we're going to give them these opportunities early on. That might impact the budget. I know some close friends of ours who've done that, and it impacts the budget. It'll also produce great results down the road, but that's a value. A couple other values that I've just put up here. A value might be that you say, hey, we want one of the parents to stay home while the kids are young. In my family, that was a value. So we did without some nice things because my mother stayed home, and none of us ever regretted it. So that was our family value. It doesn't mean that has to be everybody's family value, but that shaped certainly our financial world. It could be generous support of a cause. There could be something you say, look, we are going to, as a family, we're just going to keep doing this. It's one of the things we value. And so it may be a missionary overseas. It may be something local, whatever it is. Or to live debt-free. That's a value. To say, hey, we are going to keep debt at bay as much as possible, and when we do have to take on debt, we're going to get rid of it quickly. That's a value. Or supportive Christian education. So you say, hey, we're going to, it may mean that we do without some expensive vacations, but we're going to make sure that our kids have access to a Christian education or prepare for college and go to a college that we enjoyed as well. So those would be values. So goals, on the other hand, tend to be specific. Values can be a little more general. Goals tend to be specific. That's pretty obvious. They'll be short, medium, or long term, and once met, they can be finished. So here's an example, a couple examples. Maybe you want to save $2,400 annually for vacation. You know that's what it would take for you to do the vacation you want. So that's a goal. It's very specific, right? Not hard to know what you're going to need to do to reach that. You're going to put it away how much per month? $200 per month. Or invest $100 a month for children's education. That's a very specific goal. Doesn't mean it's going to be something that goes on for the rest of your life. There'll be a time when you need it, and then the goal is done. So what would be some other goals that you can think of? Either short-term, intermediate, or long-term. What comes to mind? Okay, getting out of debt. That could be a short or it could be a medium term, depending on what it took. So yes, that would be a goal. And once you knew what the debt looked like, you could actually put a target on that, couldn't you? You could say, we believe that in 3 years we can be debt-free except for the house. Something like that. Somebody else, a goal. Okay, grandkids' education. We want to help with that and make that happen. So yes, put a dollar figure on there and help your grandkids. Excellent. Saving for a down payment on a house. Yes. And again, you can say, well, I'm going to need about this much, and you can figure out what it would take to get there. Here are a couple more. You mentioned dealing with debt. Save for a mission trip, begin investing. Those are all goals that you take a look at. So again, values, those are family values. And, having this kind of a conversation does amazing things for a couple. Instead of dealing with debt, to sit down and say, what are our goals? And you may be surprised. You may find out that for your spouse, 3 of the goals you kind of line up on, and they had one that you had no idea, not goals, values. One of the things that was so important to them, maybe because of their upbringing, you didn't know at all. And you can work together until you say, okay, what are our family goals? Would there be any value in involving kids in this process? Or should this just be for mom and dad? At the right age, kids could definitely benefit from this mentoring, couldn't they? I mean, you're showcasing what a family does to decide how they want to use their money, rather than just coming in and seeing who spends it first until it's gone at the end of the month. I think this is the kind of stuff we really want to engage our kids in at the right age. And the right age starts pretty early, and you're going to share with them different things. For my parents, it was sitting there and counting long before I was in grade school, counting out my little dimes and pennies from, what my grandpa and grandma gave me for my birthday gift, etc. Those things take root. So, on your paper, you've got room there. Go ahead and why don't we take a couple minutes and jot down 3 to 5 family values on the paper. So again, values are, what are those things that are important to us that we want to shape our lives around? They'll impact finances, but they might impact, as we said, time or other investments as well. So go ahead and Just jot down 3 to 5 family values, and then if you're willing, it'd be fun to hear from you, 1 or 2 of those. Okay, feel free to continue to finish jotting things down. I'll go ahead and begin just by sharing one of my wife and I's values. As in the last 10 or so years, we've particularly realized that which we should know all the way along, that time with family is not only valuable, but it diminishes the older the nieces and nephews get, and you never know that any family will be there forever. And so one of our values has been to try to maximize the time we spend with family, especially our parents. And that impacts us financially. On my wife's side, we are by far the lowest earning of the individuals, so vacations can sometimes be a challenge because most people are vacationing on a level that can stretch us, but we have made it a value of ours to try to maximize those occasions where we can. So that's a family value for us. Anybody else want to share a family value that you put down? Something that drives how you do life, including finances.
My wife started teaching the first principle to our 4-year-old son and counting the coins, and
Yes.
the one that's for God. He came out this last Sabbath and he said, I decided today to give 3 instead of 1 that he was going to give for offering.
Isn't
And
that
so we
cool?
affirmed that. And so that's really his first value he's learned, financial value he's learning at age 4.
Generosity. You can't hardly get a better value than that. That's just great because it touches so many areas of life. It must make you so proud to see him taking those steps. Good. Somebody else. Family value.
Well, we'd like to give to mission projects.
Okay. So one of your values would be giving to mission projects, making a difference not only in your local area, but reaching outside where you'll only know what happens the other side of eternity. Great, great. Okay? Somebody else, yes. Help people start mission projects. Great value. Good deal. You know, and when I do this, if I sit down with couples, I'm not there to tell them what their values are. They should be driven by prayerful time with God. They may come to me and say, hey, my value is to drive a brand new car, that I turn over every 2 years, another brand new car. If that's the family value, go ahead and shape your budget around it. But don't come to me and tell me that you can't afford to have your kids in school because that's really important to you, but you don't know what else to do. Make sure your values line up with where the money's flowing. If the values and the money aren't going the same direction, something's wrong, right? So let's talk about goals. That was values. Let's talk about goals. And we've got short-term financial goals, and I've suggested that maybe those are things that could be taken care of in 18 months or less. You've got a year and a half to get something done. And then the next one would be 18 months. Midterm would be 18 months to 10 years, and long-term financial goals would be 10 plus years. So give me some examples of short-term goals. What might that be? Okay, so buy and pay for a washer and dryer. So maybe you had to go ahead and take out a loan, but you're going to make it short. You're going to keep it short. Okay, good. Another short-term goal. Okay, that's in the 12-month pay ahead on your taxes so you don't get caught. Used to be ministers had quarterly taxes. Most of us choose to let the conference collect those monthly, but I knew a pastoral couple that every quarter that came around, suddenly you started selling things. And, because those taxes, you'd spend your full paycheck, and then every quarter you had to make quarterly payments. Bad news. So yes, planning ahead. What else? Short-term goal might be paying off one or two credit cards, or the tire credit card. You bought your tires and you say, hey, we want to pay that off in the next 5 months, or whatever it is. So those would be short-term goals. How about medium-term financial goals? What could those be? What takes almost the 2 to 10 year range? Well, okay, so paying off a vehicle or saving up for the next vehicle. That'd be a great medium-term goal. Anybody else? What? Okay, great way to hit two things simultaneously. Pretty excited. They certainly didn't have that when I went to school, but now schools like Upper Columbia Academy, you can say, I'll take your wages and raise them by 25 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour. We've done that with one of our young people out there and just said, look, we'll make it more valuable for you to work. And suddenly this kid who is getting minimum wage might be doing better. And it really is a great motivator for work when it's tied to that. I like that idea. And how about a long-term financial goal? Pay off a mortgage, yes. 10 years plus, pay off a mortgage. If you accelerate it, you might be able to trim it down to, somewhere around the 20 mark instead of 30. That'd be great. Oh, you anticipate. The big question is, which of these goals are hardest to work on? The long ones, right? The ones that aren't staring you in the face. And yet they're the ones that we can get caught on if we don't do anything with them for, a year, 5 years, 10 years. Suddenly they're facing us, and it takes a lot more to get the same impact. So go ahead and jot down some short, medium, and long-term goals. You've shared some of them. Go ahead and jot down, try to get down a couple of them for where you are right now. So go ahead and jot some of those down. Now, I just have to ask, did you get the handout back there? No! Do you have a couple handouts? I am sorry. That thought ran through early, and I said, no, they look like they're doing something on handout. My failure there. Not hard to catch up, though, because the master slide is still up there, so you can catch those as you wish. So keep writing your goals. I'll tell you one of the short-term goals that we're working on. In my case, it wasn't opposites attracting. We got two savers, and I don't know if that's really a good combination. You need somebody to balance out and make life actually go. My wife and I are such savers that, we cruise through an anniversary, we look at each other and say, happy anniversary, and we keep going. No big splurges, no whatever. But we are coming up on a big one, and so a short-term goal, we decided we'd redo our transportation that we left our wedding on. A couple mountain bikes. So after 30 years, well, they look so old, people laugh at us if you go to a bike shop, so we don't go there. We just get the parts and run back home so nobody laughs at us. But we're doing a little refurbishing and kind of upgrading in a significant way. So that's a short-term goal in our lives that, mark a major milestone. We'll actually do something this time instead of just going out to Dairy Queen for ice cream, which fits our budget well, and we both like ice cream, so it works. Anybody want to share a goal? And feel free to keep jotting them down. But what would be a goal that's part of your family's life? Short term, intermediate, or long term? Yes. Yes. It does, doesn't it? We love those goals as a way of helping it lay one step at a time, a bite-sized piece. And for you, it sounds like, if I understand correctly, that's a short-term financial and personal involvement goal, since it sounds like you're doing it yourself. It's great. Thank you for sharing. Somebody else? Short-term, intermediate, long-term, I don't care which one. Anybody want to share? Plan for a refrigerator. Good, good. Excellent short-term goal. And
An income-based one could be the spouse is back in the workforce after the kids move out.
that's a major shift, isn't it? Yeah. It changes the financial picture and opens up opportunities that may not have been there. That's a major shuffling and that's one of those things, I think, just like raises, that can be quickly absorbed or intentionally directed and kind of be a fun time. So that's a great goal there. Anybody else? Paint the house. Now you touch on one of the things that I personally hate the most. I hate painting. I need to trade it with somebody. Say, look, I'll put in your timing belt. You do my house, something, please. That's okay. That's one of those goals. And
A short-term goal we should all have right now to pay our taxes in the next couple of weeks.
yeah, mine sat me back the worst they have probably ever. I've already paid him, but boy, that was painful. Yes, short-term, very short-term goal is what you're saying. This goal is measured in days, not weeks or months, unless you get an extension. Okay, good. So number 3 is to determine where you want to go. Number 2 was where am I financially. Number 3 is where do I go. And typically, if we're working on a financial outline, where we should go, where we want to be, we're not going to have 17 goals. The best we can do is have a few of each of those goals, make sure that we're not shortchanging the long term because of the short term, making sure that we're hitting each one, but making them achievable. And then when they finish, we can always reevaluate them. And I think it doesn't hurt. Let's go stronger than that. I think it's great if once a year, minimum, if you're married, you sit down and say, hey, what's the state of the affairs? This doesn't mean that you have to keep everything to the penny or do that kind of stuff, although I resonate with your dad and knowing exactly where things go. It's my style. You don't have to. But at least sitting down and saying, okay, where are we? How do we hit our goals? Are we prepped for the, how's the next year look? What goals do we need to shift, etc.? And it's an opportunity to just say, are we still on the same page? And that can be so incredibly valuable. Number 4 is to prioritize those goals and put price tags on them. Okay? So not just say, we want to do this, but you actually put price tags on the goals that you ultimately narrow down and decide. So if it's taking a vacation, it's not incredibly hard to figure out roughly what a vacation needs. It's not something you need to pen out to the penny, but if you know you're going to spend 3 nights in a hotel traveling to see relatives, you figure 100, 130, whatever you want to figure. If it's camping, gas, whatever. So you put the price tag on, and then prioritize it. Make sure, again, you're not hitting 17, but you're making sure you've got a balanced long-term, intermediate, and short-term, especially the retirement. You don't want to shortchange the retirement. You want to keep working on that one.
Now you have to figure in for inflation. I think our trip to California cost us like almost $300 more coming back. And we didn't eat out at all. Just 2 hotels and
We were down there to celebrate an 80th for my mother-in-law, and we ran around in my sister-in-law's big suburban style, and we ran around for a day, and we filled that thing up with $75 before it cut off. So yes, I feel your pain, and I'm grateful to be up here.
That's one financial goal we haven't mentioned. That's reducing the price or your spending on food, eating out. My wife and I have tried that recently. We're trying to budget our food.
How's it going?
Oh, it's going well. Yeah, just requires a little more food preparation and a little less buying prepared.
Okay, can I have a little tiny time out here? Just, well, not quite. I won't stop the clock, but you've touched on something. I just want to share it with you, something that the Lord did in our life some years back. I, like your father, and probably you, no, okay, anyway, I can tell you where our food budget goes, etc. And I can tell you how much it costs to feed this family of ours, and have people in. That's one of the things that's one of our values, is having people in from church, etc. And I can tell you very well what that will cost. Well, there comes a point where you can't just keep giving and giving and giving. So we've allocated what we want to give to tithe and offering. We've tried to be generous, but we went another step, and we said, look, God, we can't manufacture any more money. We think we're doing a balanced giving. But if there's any way you can save that we spend less on our food budget than we currently are, we'll give the difference to missions. I know what it costs to feed our family. And twice a year, 6 months in and then 12 months, we go ahead and whatever the difference is, if there's a difference, that first time, we sent a check away for $600. And we did not reduce our eating. We we just turned it over to him. It's not, it didn't gain us anything, but we said, look, if you want to be in the business of sending money elsewhere instead of the grocer or whatever, and there's no good explanation for it. Like I said, I have years of history to know what it costs to feed us, and $600 was pretty significant because it doesn't cost us much. There's two of us, and we don't mind lentils and potatoes and beans, etc. $600 wasn't in there. But that's just a little bit of what God was doing. I'm not suggesting anybody else needs to do it. I'm just saying we gave him the opportunity and said, if you want it, have at it, and we'll send it away somewhere else. So it's just a fun little thing that, another area that we partnered with him. After some years now, inflation has pretty much wiped out the target that we set and said anything under. So we're having to reevaluate that, but it's just what you're talking about. God does some interesting things. So I didn't bring this sheet, but that's basically what I would do for setting the goals and then putting the approximate cost. And obviously, you're then going to divide that cost by the time frame and weave that into your family's budget, and that is your plan. So you're saying these are what's most valuable to us. This is how we express our values. These are our goals that we're going to work together on. And then number 5 is to chart how to get there, which is, again, working those into that family. I hate to use the word budget because for many people they think, even when you spell it, it's 4 letters. That budget is a 4-letter word. It's just a plan. Now, of course, there's a 4-letter word, but it's your plan of how do you want to go where God is leading you and where your family has agreed to go. So you're just going to weave them in by saying, hey, we want to take that vacation to see Grandpa and Grandma. We want the kids to have those memories, so how much is it going to cost? And you're going to weave that in. Here's the beauty of it, I think. What if something else comes up? I come home and tell my wife, hey, I just saw this cool 4-wheeler on Craigslist. I think we ought to buy it. Well, instead of saying no, what do? We go back to our goals and say, is this more important than any one of our goals? We've laid out our family plan here. We've laid out where we want to go. If we come back and we say, yeah, that's more important than these 2 goals, you can move that out. Otherwise, you just have to remind yourself, these are our family goals, and I don't see that right now that 4-wheeler's fitting in there, so I guess we'll have to wait until that becomes a higher goal. And so your goals drive where you're headed rather than Craigslist. I do occasionally lurk on Craigslist to see what I can pick up. It drives that better than sales at Costco or these impulse things. We aren't arguing with each other. We just say, hey, we agreed on these goals. What do you think? Is this new thing better or worse? Where does it fit? And so our goals are driving our finances rather than impulses here and there. So, what about new goals? Well, I kind of just tipped my hand there, at least with that example. New goals, you're just going to evaluate against your existing goals. If you can either fit it in, kind of worm it in, if that's an agreed upon goal, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, set it aside and say, here's a future goal. We'll re-examine this as some of these goals are finished, as they drop off. It may make room for this, but we're going to make sure that we're goal-driven rather than just jumping from impulse to impulse. What if we can't agree? Help me out. Plenty of you have been married longer than I have, even though I'm coming up on a milestone. What happens when you can't agree financially? Or maybe what should happen? Either one. I'm sure whatever characterizes your marriages, it's always been spot on, but humor us with sharing what couples might do. Okay. And how often is that the last, if ever, thought of when we get into a financial disagreement? Say, hey, let's pray about this. We committed this to God to begin with. He's certainly interested along the way. Great answer. So you get a 5 for... What else? Might be some need for compromise, right? One of the things that I think is helpful is that to not be so locked into having to do everything together is to have a little bit of money that each person can spend however they wish, no matter how ridiculous the other spouse thinks that thing is. My wife and I, we each have a little account, and it's not much per month, but I told you we're savers, so we aren't even spending that little bit. So it's grown to ridiculous amounts. We have a couple shekels every month that we can do whatever we want, and she may think I'm crazy, but that's okay. That little segment is my money, and I can do with it as I wish. She could too if she ever got around to spending it, but she's an awful saver.
Well, I think you should find out where each one's coming from, because they may look at things entirely because of their background. So I think you should really find out, the reasons why there's a disagreement.
Listening is a completely underrated, valuable skill. Saying, let me learn what you think before I tell you again what I think. And let me actually listen rather than just getting my response ready as soon as you pause. Yes. Stopping and saying, help me understand, Why is it that you want a four-wheeler when your garage won't fit anything else? Or whatever it is. And I'm not wanting a four-wheeler, actually. I'm a two-wheeled guy, but being willing to listen rather than jump immediately. Yes, very good. The voice of experience. What else? What if we can't agree?
Ken has an answer to that.
Yes, dear. Well, you guys are scoring all kinds of 5-star. When we appreciate each other, when we're willing to say, might not be my first choice, but I can sure live with that. Let's give it a whirl. Let's try it. Yeah. That can be a really good thing, is not to say, hey, let's not say no, but let's revisit this in a year as a couple of these goals drop off. At that point, it may rise to that level. Good. Do we have to agree on everything? You want to agree on the core values. You want to really agree on the key things. Do you have to agree on everything? No. There's going to be give and take, compromise, the whole works. And we already talked that involving children in the whole process at whatever is age appropriate. I love one of the illustrations I read some time back. Kids in high school, and the parents said, okay, we're going to continue the lessons we've been teaching on budgeting. And so when school came around, late summer, they said, okay, you're buying your own wardrobe. That wouldn't have worked for me. I don't have a color sense in my head. But they sent the kids out to buy their own wardrobe. And, some of them did wisely. Some of them had money left. And one of them, as I remember the story, the boy wanted a skateboard far more than he wanted anything else. And so he bought one pair of school pants and a couple of shirts and then a really nice skateboard. And it wasn't that long into the new school year that his knees were pretty blown out on his one pair of pants because he'd been skateboarding, right? And the parents said it was so embarrassing. They wanted to swoop in and get him new pairs of pants because, what happens? Your kids reflect on you, right? I mean, what kind of a parent sends their kids to school raggedy looking, etc. But they said they decided not to. And the next year, he made much different choices. It was tough. A great learning experience, though.
Our grandson from Florida came out to live with us. He saved his money, and he wanted this expensive kind of Nike shoes. He spent a lot of money for those. In a few months, the soles were flapping and everything. And I think he learned a good lesson.
You know, sometimes,
Very conservative with his money, except for that one thing.
and sometimes allowing to learn rather than directing away from a poor decision can be a great learning experience, can't it? And we all learn that way. All right. Well, that's what I wanted to share with you in the time that we had tonight. Those 5 steps that I think will help people first connect with God, find out where I am, where do I want to go, and then cruise down that path in a way that reaches the goals that we've set as a couple, rather than just going wherever the sales drive us because of the monthly payment. Any observations, questions before we have closing prayer? Good. I hope you can find somebody to share them with. I know many of you have practiced good things here, and the ability to gently mentor can be just wonderful. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful that you take personal interest in the minutiae of our lives. Even to us, sometimes it seems so small and insignificant, and yet you're interested. You want, as we saw John 10:10, you want to come and bring life to the full. And Father, one way is partnering with you. We thank you for this opportunity that you've given to us, and we just pray that out of our lives, the joy that you bring can help others see the joy of partnering with you, reducing stress, and increasing kingdom impact. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.